The alarm sirens screamed across Anchorage 7 like wounded animals. Day 1 ran through the colony's main corridor, his boots hammering against metal floors. People rushed past him, parents clutching children, engineers shouting into communicators. The terraforming core was dying, and when it died, so would everyone on this world. How long do we have? Day 1 asked as he burst into the control center. Hannah looked up from her medical station, her face pale. 12 hours. Maybe less. The radiation will kill us before the cold does. Una stood at the engineering console, her fingers flying across holographic displays. Sweat dripped down her face despite the cooling systems. I've tried everything. The core's fusion chamber is collapsing. We can't stabilize it with what we have. Day 1 gripped the edge of the console. 200,000 people lived on Anchorage 7. They had come here to build a new world, far from overcrowded Earth. Now that dream was turning into a nightmare. What about Earth? Can they send help? They're 6 months away at maximum speed, Una said quietly. We sent the distress signal 4 hours ago. They won't even receive it for another 3 weeks. The control room fell silent except for the steady beep of failing systems. Day 1 closed his eyes. He had promised these people safety. He had convinced families to leave everything behind and trust him. Now he was helpless. Sir, we're receiving a response to our distress signal. A communications officer called out. Everyone turned. From Earth already? That's impossible, Hannah said. No, sir. It's not from Earth. It's from a ship nearby. They're identifying themselves as Velthrin. Day 1 had heard of the Velthrin. An old species, once powerful, now fading into obscurity. They kept to themselves, trading rarely with other civilizations. What do they want? They say they detected our distress signal. They're asking permission to approach and render assistance. Una pulled up her star charts. There's a Velthrin trade route about 6 light hours from here. If they heard us and came immediately, she looked at Day 1 with something like hope. They could actually reach us in time. 3 hours later, a Velthrin ship entered orbit around Anchorage 7. It was an old vessel, scarred and patched from countless journeys. Through the view screen, Day 1 watched as a shuttle descended toward the colony's landing pad. He went to meet them personally. The Velthrin who emerged were tall and reptilian, with scales that shimmered in colors between green and bronze. Their eyes were large and ancient-looking. The leader stepped forward slowly, using a walking staff for support. I am Thros, the Velthrin said through a translation device. His voice was deep and tired. We heard your cry for help. Administrator Day 1. Our terraforming core is collapsing. We have maybe 9 hours left. Day 1 tried to keep the desperation out of his voice. Can you help us? Thros studied him for a long moment. Perhaps. Our technology is old, but it is stable. We have fusion stabilizers that might contain your core's collapse long enough for proper repairs. He paused. But I must be honest with you. Using them will drain our ship's life support reserves. The journey home will be difficult for us. We'll give you whatever resources we have, Day 1 said immediately. You misunderstand. We carry cultural artifacts from our homeworld, items from our greatest museum. They are traveling to our last archive world. If we use our reserves, we risk losing the environmental controls that protect them. Some may be damaged or destroyed. Day 1 felt cold. These artifacts were probably priceless, irreplaceable pieces of Velthrin history. I can't ask you to sacrifice that. Thros made a gesture that might have been a smile. You did not ask. We offered. He turned to his crew and spoke in their language. They moved quickly, bringing equipment from the shuttle. The next 6 hours were frantic. Una worked alongside Velthrin engineers, learning their technology on the fly. The equipment was indeed old, but beautifully designed, elegant in its simplicity. Slowly and possibly, the readings began to stabilize. "It's working," Una breathed. "The cascade is reversing. We're going to make it." But the victory came with a cost. Day one watched as Velthrin crew members began to show signs of distress. Without full life support, their shuttle's atmosphere was becoming toxic to them. Two of the Velthrin engineers collapsed before the work was complete. Hannah rushed to help them, but one was already dead. The other died an hour later, despite everything the human medical team could do. When the core finally stabilized, Thross stood on the landing pad, preparing to leave. His scales had dulled, and he moved even more slowly than before. Behind him, his crew loaded 2 sealed containers onto the shuttle. Day one knew what they contained. "You saved us," Day one said. 200,000 lives. "And you lost your people." "Your artifacts." "Only some of the artifacts," Thross replied. "And 2 brave crew members who knew the risks." As for why, he looked up at the stars. Because it was right. Because life is precious. Because when you can help, you should. He met the one's eyes. "We expect nothing in return. This is simply what civilized beings do for one another." Day one felt something break inside him, something that reformed into iron certainty. "My people will remember this. I swear to you, on everything I hold sacred, humanity will remember what you did here today." Thross tilted his head. Memory is a gift in itself. Then he boarded his shuttle and left on. As Day one watched the Velthrin ship depart, Una and Hannah stood beside him. "We owe them everything," Hannah said softly. "Yes," Day one agreed. "And we will repay that debt, no matter how long it takes." The stars above seemed to shine a little brighter. Somewhere up there, the Velthrin were traveling home, diminished but unbowed. And on Anchorage 7, 200,000 humans had learned a lesson about sacrifice and grace that they would carry with them forever. The incident became known as the Velthrin Gift, and humanity, for all its faults, never forgot a debt. Tae-young stood before the Human Coalition Council, a datapad clutched in his hands. 50 years had passed since the Velthrin Gift. His father, Day one, had died 5 years ago, but not before making his son promise to continue the work. The galaxy had changed dramatically in those decades, and not for the better. "Counselors, I need you to look at these reports," Tae-young said, activating the holographic display. Images of Velthrin worlds appeared, showing declining cities and empty spaceports. "This is Velthros Prime, the Velthrin homeworld. Their population has dropped by 40% in the last 50 years. Counselor Park, an elderly woman from Mars, frowned. "Species decline is unfortunate, but natural. Why should this concern us?" Tae-young felt frustration rise in his chest, but kept his voice calm. "Because they saved Anchorage 7. They sacrificed their own people and priceless cultural treasures to save 200,000 humans. And we've done nothing to repay them." "We sent trade delegations," another counselor argued. "We've maintained diplomatic relations." "Token gestures," Tae-young said firmly. "Meanwhile, aggressive species like the Kryn Dominion are expanding. They're squeezing out older civilizations, taking their resources, absorbing their territories. The Velthrin have only 3 worlds left. Within a generation, they might disappear entirely." June, the military advisor, spoke up from his seat. He was a veteran of the border wars, scarred and serious. "What exactly are you proposing?" Tae-young took a breath. "The Gratitude Protocol. Systematic, long-term assistance to the Velthrin. Trade agreements that favor their economy. Technology sharing to help them modernize without losing their culture. Defense pacts to protect them from expansion by hostile powers." The council chamber erupted in argument. Voices overlapped, some supportive, many skeptical. Councilor Kim, representing the industrial worlds, stood up. "This would cost trillions. We have our own problems. Colonial expansion, infrastructure, defense. We can't afford to support a dying civilization out of sentiment. It's not sentiment, a voice called out. Everyone turned. Mira walked down the center aisle. She was a historian, keeper of human cultural memory, and she carried herself with quiet authority. May I address the council? The council president nodded. Mira stepped up beside Taeyong and spoke without notes, her voice clear and strong. 50 years ago, a Velthran ship captain named Thros made a choice. He didn't have to help Anchorage 7. His ship was carrying irreplaceable artifacts, treasures from his species' entire history. His crew was small, and diverting would risk their lives. She paused, letting the silence build. But Thros chose to help anyway. 2 of his crew members died from exposure. Artifacts thousands of years old were damaged or destroyed. And when it was done, when he had saved 200,000 human lives, he said something remarkable. He said he expected nothing in return. That helping was simply what civilized beings do for one another. Myra walked slowly along the council floor, making eye contact with each counselor. Now, we have a choice. We can follow the path of species like the Kryn, who measure everything in profit and power, who take and consume and expand without thought for others. Or we can prove that Thros was right about us, that we are civilized, that we remember our debts. This isn't about debt, Councillor Park protested. It's about practical resource allocation. Everything is about debt, Myra said quietly. Every human on Anchorage 7 is alive because the Velthran helped. Those people had children. Those children had children. There are now over 3 million humans alive who exist only because of the Velthran gift. How do you calculate the value of 3 million lives? How do you put a price on that? The chamber fell silent. June stood up. I've reviewed the military situation. The Velthran are vulnerable. Their defense fleet is outdated. If we don't help them, someone else will make that decision for them. The Kryn will absorb their worlds within 10 years. Maybe less. And if we help them? Councillor Kim asked. What happens to us? Taeyong activated another display. We gain loyal allies. The Velthran have technologies we've lost or never developed. Their fusion stabilizers are more efficient than ours. Their environmental systems are remarkable. Beyond that, we gain something more important. We gain reputation. He showed a star map. Look at the galaxy. The aggressive species are expanding, but they're not trusted. Smaller civilizations live in fear. If humanity becomes known as a species that honors its debts, that protects its allies, others will come to us. We become a center of stability instead of just another competing power. The debate continued for hours. In the end, the vote was close. The Gratitude Protocol passed by a margin of only 3 votes. But it passed. Within months, human trade convoys began regular routes to Velthran space. The convoys brought raw materials, modern technology, medical supplies. Human engineers worked alongside Velthran craftsmen, learning from each other. June established military exchange programs, where young officers from both species trained together. The Velthran were bewildered at first. Their diplomats kept asking what humanity wanted in return, what the hidden price was. Taeyong's response was always the same. You saved Anchorage 7. This is what gratitude looks like. Slowly, the Velthran economy stabilized. Their population decline stopped. New construction appeared on their worlds for the first time in a century, and they began to understand something remarkable. Humanity actually meant what they said. The humans actually remembered. 5 years into the Gratitude Protocol, Taeyong received a message from Velthros Prime. It was from the Velthran Council of Elders. The message was simple but profound. We have lived for millennia and seen countless species rise and fall. Never have we encountered any who honor debts as humans do. You have restored our faith in civilization itself." Tae-young sat in his office, reading those words over and over. His father had been right. Memory mattered. Gratitude mattered. In a galaxy that often seemed cold and cruel, these things were not weakness. They were strength. Outside his window, he could see ships coming and going from Earth's orbital stations. Some of those ships carried Velthran crew now, working alongside humans. Two species, learning from each other, building something new together. The galaxy was watching, and humanity was teaching it a lesson that many had forgotten. That civilization was not measured in weapons or territory, but in how you treated those who had helped you when you needed it most. The Velthran gift had been repaid, but the story was far from over. It was only beginning. Admiral Bin stood on the bridge of the Human Coalition warship Remembrance, watching the Kryn Dominion fleet assemble on his tactical display. 73 warships, all pointed at Velthros Prime like weapons ready to fire. His own battle group numbered only 32 ships. The mathematics were not encouraging. "Sir, we're receiving the Kryn ultimatum broadcast," his communications officer reported. Bin listened to the cold, mechanical voice of the Kryn commander. "Velthran worlds will be annexed into the Dominion. Resistance is futile. You have 12 hours to begin evacuation of military assets. After that time, we will assume control by force." Beside him, Commander Sora clenched her fists. She ran the Special Forces Division, tough soldiers who had seen combat across a dozen worlds. "They're not even pretending it's anything but conquest." Bin looked at the planet below. Velthros Prime, ancient and beautiful, home to billions of Velthran. Cities that had stood for thousands of years. Libraries filled with knowledge. All of it about to be swallowed by an empire that saw everything as resources to be exploited. "Calculate jump coordinates for Earth," Bin said quietly. His navigation officer looked confused. "Sir, we're supposed to observe and report." "The Council hasn't authorized military intervention." "I'm not going to Earth," Bin said. "I'm calculating how long it would take for orders to arrive." He smiled without humor. 8 weeks for our message to reach Earth. Another 8 weeks for the response. By then, this will all be over. "Sir, what are you saying?" Bin stood up straight, his decision made. "I'm saying that asking permission to do the right thing is sometimes the same as choosing to do nothing. Open a channel to all ships in the battle group." When the channel opened, Bin spoke clearly and calmly. "All ships, this is Admiral Bin. You've all heard the Kryn ultimatum. You all know what happens next if we do nothing. The Velthran saved Anchorage 7 73 years ago. They sacrificed their people and their treasures to save humans they had never met. Now they need us." He paused, looking at the faces of his crew. Young and old, from a dozen different human worlds. "I'm taking Remembrance into Velthran space. I'm putting this ship between the Kryn fleet and Velthros Prime. Anyone who wants to follow me can. Anyone who doesn't, I understand. You won't face any consequences. This is my choice, and I'll face whatever comes from it." For a long moment, silence filled the channel. Then, one by one, every ship in the battle group signaled acknowledgement. They would all follow him. Bin nodded slowly. "Thank you." All ships jumped to Velthros Prime and send a message to the Kryn fleet. Tell them that an attack on the Velthran is an attack on humanity's honor. Tell them we will stand with our allies, even unto death. The jump was short but felt like forever. When they emerged in orbit around Velthros Prime, the Velthran defense fleet was already there. Their old ships preparing for a battle they couldn't win. Bin opened communications with the Velthran flagship. A Velthran admiral appeared on screen, scales dulled with age, but eyes still sharp. "Human ships, why are you here? Your council has not declared war on the Kryn." "My council is very far away," Bin said. But I am here, and I remember what your people did for mine." The Velthran admiral was silent for a moment. "You cannot win this battle. The Kryn outnumber us significantly." "Probably," Bin agreed. "But we can make them pay for every inch of space. We can make them remember that attacking our friends is never easy or cheap." The Kryn response came quickly. Their fleet advanced. Bin gave the order, and human ships moved to intercept, placing themselves in front of the older Velthran vessels. The first exchange of fire lit up the darkness of space with brilliant, deadly light. The battle lasted 3 weeks. The Kryn kept sending reinforcements, clearly not expecting such fierce resistance. Bin's ships fought with calculated fury, using every tactic human military minds had developed over centuries of conflict. But there were casualties. Ships were destroyed. Thousands of human crew members died. On the surface of Velthros Prime, Sora led ground forces alongside a young Velthran warrior named Kale. The Kryn had landed troops, trying to take the capital city and force a quick surrender. Kale had been suspicious of humans at first, wondering if they had ulterior motives. That suspicion died during the first week of fighting. "Why are you doing this?" Kale asked Sora as they took cover behind rubble. Explosions lit up the street ahead of them. "Your people are dying for a world that isn't yours." Sora checked her weapon and looked at him. 73 years ago, your people saved 200,000 humans. You didn't have to. You did it because it was right." She smiled grimly. "We're returning the favor. But this is different. This is war. This is death." "Doesn't matter," Sora said simply. "A debt is a debt, and humans pay their debts." The ground battle was brutal. Street by street, building by building, human and Velthran soldiers fought side by side. Sora watched her soldiers give their lives to hold positions, to buy time, to protect Velthran civilians. She watched Kale begin to understand that human loyalty wasn't just words. It was action. It was sacrifice. In orbit, Admiral Bin's fleet was slowly being ground down. He had lost 12 ships. Thousands were dead. But the Kryn were paying an even higher price. For every human ship destroyed, 2 or 3 Kryn vessels were crippled or eliminated. And the Kryn commanders were beginning to realize something troubling. Humanity was willing to die for their allies. That was a factor the Kryn hadn't calculated. They were used to species who fought for territory or resources, who surrendered when the cost got too high. But the humans weren't surrendering. They were getting more determined. On the 21st day of battle, a new human fleet arrived. Ships from the Border Patrol, from colony defense forces, even civilian vessels that had been quickly armed. They hadn't waited for council authorization either. They had heard that humans were fighting to protect their allies, and they came to help. The Kryn fleet finally withdrew on the 23rd day. They hadn't been defeated, exactly, but they had been stopped. And the cost of continuing was becoming unacceptable. As the last Kryn ship jumped away, Bin sat in his command chair, exhausted. Nearly 8,000 human crew members were dead. 20 ships destroyed or crippled. But Velthros Prime still stood, free and independent. Kale stood in the ruins of the capital city beside Sora, watching human medics treat Velthran wounded as carefully as they treated their own. "I didn't believe it," he said quietly. "I thought humans would have some hidden reason, some profit motive. But you really did this just because we helped you once." Sora put a hand on his shoulder. "We did it because you showed us what civilization really means. You gave without expecting return. We learned from that, and we'll never forget it." News of the battle spread across the galaxy at the speed of light. Humanity had fought a war to protect allies who couldn't protect themselves. They had sacrificed thousands of lives to repay a debt 73 years old. Species everywhere took notice, and the galaxy began to wonder. If humans would do this for the Velthran, What would they do for other allies? What kind of loyalty was this that could survive decades and cost so much blood? Admiral Ben looked at the stars and knew that everything had changed. Humanity had made a statement, and the universe was listening. Hyan sat in her office on Earth, staring at the flood of messages on her screens. As Earth's chief ambassador to the Galactic Council, she was used to diplomatic communications. But this was something else entirely. In the 2 months since the Battle of Velthros Prime, her office had received contact requests from 47 different species. All of them wanted the same thing: alliance with humanity. "This is unprecedented," Era said, standing beside her desk. The intelligence analyst had been tracking the galactic response to the battle. Species that haven't spoken to each other in centuries are all reaching out to us simultaneously. Hyan scrolled through the messages. The Minlik Collective, bullied by the Kryn for decades. The Therian Assembly, whose trade routes were constantly threatened. The Sovar Commonwealth, whose colonies were slowly being absorbed by larger powers. All of them small, all of them vulnerable, all of them desperate. What are they asking for? Hyan asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. "That's the interesting part," Era said, pulling up her analysis. "They're not asking for military protection. Well, not primarily. They're asking for partnership. Trade agreements. Cultural exchange. Defense pacts, yes, but as part of broader alliances." Hyan frowned. "Why? We're not the strongest military power. The Kryn have more ships. The Nexian Empire has better technology. Because they trust us," Era said simply. The Battle of Velthros Prime wasn't just a military engagement. It was proof. Proof that humans actually mean what they say. That we'll honor our commitments, even when it costs us. 8,000 dead, Hyan said quietly. 20 ships destroyed. All to protect a species most humans had never even heard of before. Exactly. And that terrifies the aggressive empires. But it gives hope to everyone else. Era activated a holographic display showing the galactic map. Look at the political structure. For centuries, small civilizations have been caught between expanding empires. They ally with the strong for protection, but those alliances are predatory. The strong demand tribute, resources, subservience. There's no trust. She highlighted clusters of systems. But humanity offered something different to the Velthrin. We gave without demanding. We helped them rebuild. And when they were threatened, we actually fought for them. Not because we had to. Not because of a treaty. But because we said we would. Hyan understood. In a galaxy built on suspicion and self-interest, humanity had done something radical. They had been genuinely loyal. 3 weeks later, an emergency session of the Galactic Council was called. Hyan sat in Earth's delegation pod, watching as representatives from hundreds of species gathered in the massive chamber on Nexus 9 station. The council rarely met in full session. Something significant was happening. The Kryn ambassador spoke first, his mechanical voice echoing through the chamber. "We call this session to address humanity's destabilizing actions. Their unprovoked attack on Kryn forces at Velthros Prime was an act of aggression that threatens galactic peace." Hyan smiled coldly. "Unprovoked? You issued an ultimatum of annexation. You were preparing to invade an independent world. We were claiming undefended territory. The Velthrin were in decline. Resources being wasted. The Dominion would put those worlds to better use." "Better use?" Hyan repeated. "You mean strip mining their planets and erasing their culture?" The chamber erupted in argument. Species shouted at each other across the vast space. The council president, a neutral arbiter from an ancient species, called for order. It took several minutes for the noise to die down. Then something unexpected happened. A request for recognition came from the Velthrin delegation. The view screen shifted to show an elderly Velthran. Scales faded almost to white. Hyan felt her breath catch. It was Elder Thros, the captain who had saved Anchorage 7. He was ancient now, his movements slow and careful. "I request permission to address the council," Thros said, his voice still deep despite his age. The council president granted it. Thros's image appeared on the massive central display, visible to everyone. "I am Thros of Velthros Prime. Many cycles ago, I commanded a trade vessel. We heard a distress call from a human colony. Their world was dying. We had the means to help, though it would cost us dearly." He paused, and absolute silence filled the chamber. "We helped because it was the right thing to do. We saved 200,000 humans and expected nothing in return. We told them this. We believed our gesture would be forgotten within a generation, as such things usually are." Thros looked directly at the Kryn delegation. But humans remembered. For 73 years they remembered. They built their gratitude protocol. They helped rebuild our economy. They shared their technology. And when we faced destruction, they came. They fought. They died. 8,000 human souls gave their lives to protect my people. He let that number hang in the air. The Kryn call this destabilizing. I call it civilization. And I ask the council a simple question. Which is more destabilizing? Loyalty that uplifts? Or expansion that destroys? The chamber remained silent. Hyan watched as delegates looked at each other, whispering, considering. Thros had cut through all the political maneuvering with brutal clarity. The debate that followed lasted for hours. The aggressive empires, the Kryn, the Nexians, the Volter hegemony, all argued that humanity was setting a dangerous precedent, that such emotional decision-making undermined a careful balance of power. But the smaller species spoke up too. One by one, ambassadors stood and shared their own stories. Times when they had been threatened, when they had asked larger powers for help and been ignored or exploited. Times when promises were broken, when alliances meant nothing. The Minlik ambassador stood, her crystalline body refracting light across the chamber. For 40 years, we paid tribute to the Kryn for protection. When pirates attacked our trade convoys, the Kryn did nothing. They collected payment but provided no service. Now humans offer us a different path. Partnership, mutual defense, actual loyalty. More voices joined her. Species after species standing up, declaring their intention to seek alliance with humanity. The council president looked overwhelmed by the session's end. 12 species had formally announced mutual defense pacts with humanity. Another 35 requested diplomatic negotiations. And a new name emerged from the chaos. The Coalition of Remembered Bonds. Hyan stood with other human diplomats, watching as the session broke up. Era appeared beside her, looking stunned. "Do you understand what just happened? We just became a major power bloc. Not through conquest, not through technology, through trust." "We also made enemies," Hyan said, watching the Kryn delegation storm out. "The aggressive empires won't accept this quietly." "No, they won't," Era agreed. "But they also can't fight all of us at once. That's the point of a coalition." Over the following months, the Coalition of Remembered Bonds took shape. It wasn't a traditional empire. There was no central authority, no tribute system. Instead, each species contributed according to their strengths. The Velthran provided advanced fusion technology. The Minlik shared their crystalline computing systems. The Therian offered agricultural innovations. And humanity provided something that held it all together. The reputation for actually keeping their word. Hyan met regularly with Elder Thros via hologram. The old Velthran was fascinated by what humanity had created. "You took our simple act of kindness and built an alliance from it," he said during one conversation. "You showed us what was possible, Hyan replied. You proved that civilization doesn't have to be about exploitation, that helping others isn't weakness. Thros made that gesture that might have been a smile. Perhaps. But humans are the ones who remembered. Memory is a choice. You chose to remember, and that choice changed everything. As Hyan ended the call, she looked out at the stars. The galaxy was reshaping itself around a radical idea, that loyalty and gratitude could be foundations for power. That trust could be strategic strength. The aggressive empires were watching nervously, because humanity and its allies had proven something dangerous to predatory civilizations. They had proven that there was another way, and that way was growing stronger every day. 25 years after the Battle of Velthrus Prime, Ji Woo stood before the assembled representatives of 47 species. As president of the Human Coalition, she had seen the galaxy transform. The coalition of remembered bonds had grown from a desperate alliance of the weak into something no one had anticipated, a genuine superpower, built on mutual respect rather than fear. We face a threat, unlike any before, Ji Woo said, her voice steady despite the weight of her words. The holographic display behind her showed long-range sensor data. Ships, thousands of them, emerging from dark space beyond the galactic rim. They call themselves the Devourers. They don't negotiate. They don't trade. They consume everything in their path. Nara, the lead scientist of the Coalition's Joint Research Initiative, stepped forward. We've analyzed their technology. It's advanced, but not overwhelmingly so. What makes them dangerous is their numbers and their coordination. They function as a single entity, a hive mind of sorts. Huan, fleet commander of the Coalition forces, activated tactical displays. They'll reach the outer colonies in 6 months. Our projections show them sweeping through this entire spiral arm within 5 years if we don't stop them. The chamber filled with worried murmurs. 47 species, each with their own languages and cultures, all facing the same existential threat. Ji Woo watched them and felt a moment of doubt. Could this alliance, built on trust and goodwill, actually stand against a threat like this? Then Velkar stood up. The young Velthran leader was Thros's great-grandson, energetic where his ancestor had been weary. Earth President Ji Woo, the Velthran fleet stands ready. Our ships may be built from old designs, but they have been upgraded with human technology and Minlik computing systems. We will fight. One by one, other leaders stood. The Minlik, the Therian, the Sovar, species that had once cowered before aggressive empires now stood together, ready to defend not just their own worlds, but each other's. Ji Woo felt her doubt evaporate. Then we fight together. Not as separate species defending separate territories, but as one coalition defending our shared civilization. The next 6 months were a storm of preparation. Nara's scientific teams worked miracles, combining technologies from dozens of species. Velthran fusion cores powered human weapons platforms. Minlik crystalline computers coordinated Therian agricultural ships converted into supply vessels. The Sovar's deep space sensors, enhanced with human software, tracked the Devour fleet's approach. Huan assembled the largest military force in galactic history. Not the largest from any single species, but the largest cooperative fleet ever created. Ships from 47 different civilizations, all working together under unified command structures. The challenge was enormous. Each species had different communication protocols, different tactical doctrines, different cultural approaches to warfare. But they had something more important than uniformity. They had trust. Huan remembered the Battle of Velthrus Prime, where he had been a young officer on Admiral Bin's ship. Admiral Bin taught me something, he told his command staff. Unity doesn't come from everyone being the same. It comes from everyone believing their allies will stand with them. When the Devourer fleet reached the outer colonies, they found the Coalition waiting. The first battle was brutal. The Devourers fought with mechanical precision, their ships moving in perfect synchronization. But the Coalition fought with something the Devourers couldn't calculate: creativity born of cooperation. Velthran ships used their stable fusion cores to create electromagnetic fields that disrupted Devourer communications. Human fighters used Minlik targeting computers to achieve impossible accuracy. Therian support vessels kept supply lines open through routes the Devourers couldn't predict. Each species contributed their unique strengths, and together they were far more than the sum of their parts. The battles continued for months. There were losses. Entire fleets were destroyed. Worlds were damaged. Billions of civilians had to be evacuated. But the Coalition held. More importantly, they adapted. Nara's teams analyzed every battle, sharing findings instantly across all Coalition species. What one species learned in one engagement, all species knew within hours. Juan stood on the bridge of the flagship Unity, watching tactical displays. Beside him stood Velkar and commanders from a dozen other species. "They're pulling back," Velkar said, watching the Devourer formations retreat. "They're regrouping," Juan corrected. "They've never faced coordinated resistance like this. They're trying to calculate a new approach." A Minlik officer, her crystalline form pulsing with light, spoke up. "Our computers are tracking their pattern changes. They're showing confusion in their collective consciousness. They can't understand why we fight for each other instead of just our own worlds." Juan smiled grimly. "Then let's teach them." The decisive battle came above a world called Haven, a joint colony where multiple Coalition species lived together. The Devourers threw everything at it, clearly trying to break the Coalition's will by destroying a symbol of cooperation. Instead, they encountered the fiercest resistance yet. Ships from every Coalition species converged on Haven. They fought with desperate courage, protecting not just their own colonists but everyone's. Human ships took hits meant for Velthran vessels. Therian captains sacrificed their ships to save Minlik crews. Over and over, the Devourers' cold calculations failed because they couldn't predict species willingly dying for each other. The battle lasted 3 days. When it ended, the Devourer fleet was in full retreat. They had encountered something their hive mind couldn't overcome: the chaos and strength of genuine loyalty. In the aftermath, Ji Wu addressed the Coalition again. She stood not in a government building but on Haven itself, surrounded by the ruins of the battle and the people who had survived it. Humans, Velthran, Minlik, and dozens of other species working together to rebuild. 123 years ago, Ji Wu said, a Velthran ship captain named Thros made a choice. He helped strangers who needed it, expecting nothing in return. He couldn't have known what that choice would lead to. He couldn't have imagined this coalition, this alliance of 47 species standing together against extinction. She looked at the crowd, seeing the diversity of life that made up the coalition. Thros told the first humans he saved that helping was simply what civilized beings do for one another. We took those words and built a civilization from them. Not a civilization of one species, but of many. Not an empire of conquest, but a coalition of cooperation. Ji Wu gestured to the rebuilding efforts around them. The Devourers thought they could sweep through this galaxy because they saw us as separate, competing species. They didn't understand that we had learned something they never could. That loyalty and gratitude aren't weaknesses. They're the strongest bonds in the universe. Velkar stepped forward, elderly now, but still dignified. My great-grandfather's gift was small. One ship, one act of kindness. But humanity's gift was greater. You showed the galaxy that civilization is a choice. That we can choose cooperation over conquest. That we can choose to remember our debts and honor our bonds. Work crews from multiple species stopped to listen. Engineers, medics, soldiers, civilians. All of them part of this impossible alliance. The Devourers will return, Ji-woo said honestly. There will be other threats. But we've proven something today. We've proven that when civilizations stand together, really stand together with genuine trust and loyalty, they're unstoppable. Later, as the coalition leaders prepared to return to their respective worlds, Nara approached Ji-woo. The council has approved my proposal. We're building a monument on Anchorage 7. What will it show? Ji-woo asked. Thros's ship arriving to save the colony. Velthrin and humans working together. And an inscription. Nara pulled up the design. The words glowed in the display. Here, strangers became saviors. In gratitude, we found purpose. In loyalty, we found strength. In remembering, we changed the fate of worlds. Ji-woo read it slowly, feeling the weight of history. From one act of kindness to an alliance of 47 species. From 200,000 lives saved to billions protected. All because humanity had made a choice to remember. The galaxy had learned what humanity always knew. That civilization wasn't measured in weapons or territory or technological advancement. It was measured in how you treated those who helped you. In whether you remembered your debts. In whether your word meant something. The aggressive empires still existed, still schemed and plotted. But they were no longer the dominant force in galactic politics. The coalition of remembered bonds had shown there was another way. A better way. And across the stars, on thousands of worlds, billions of beings from dozens of species looked up at the night sky and knew they were part of something unprecedented. A civilization built not on fear or greed, but on gratitude and loyalty. Thros's gift, given so long ago expecting nothing, had changed the fate of worlds. And humanity's response, their refusal to forget, had changed the fate of the galaxy itself. In the end, the universe learned a simple truth. Mankind's loyalty lasts forever, and their gratitude can reshape reality.